Let's turn now our attention to another major concern in the state of Michigan, education. This year, test scores show students across the state are still struggling with reading and math. So we got a roundtable together to take a look at what we should be focusing on in Michigan to help our kids succeed. Joining myself and Stephen Henderson are Chastity Pratt Dawsey, reporter with Bridge Magazine, Ken Whipple of the Michigan Achieves campaign, and Erin Einhorn, reporter from Chalkbeat, Detroit.
Michigan is not where it used to be. I don't know that I would be quite as alarmed by it if I saw a real plan. But I don't see a plan. I see, a lot of people pointing fingers saying, oh no, well, we can't do that and we can't do that. A lot of people are against a lot of things. But even, when the test scores came out the other day, one of the comments from a state official is, well, we're really going to look at this and we're going to come up with a solution. And I was like, oh, you're going to look at it.
When?
Not only is there not a plan, there's no discussion of creating a plan.
Well, and that solution for some people says, well, how about we change the test? So let's jump into that and talk about how we saw the M-STEP results. Now, the M-STEP, for people who aren't totally familiar, replaced the MEEP test, which is a standardized test in the state of Michigan. And so this is the second year that it's been given. And so when these results came out this week that weren't very good. I mean, they were flat in English, they were flat in math, they were up a little bit in science, and they were down a little bit in social studies. What is the significance of seeing these results? And Stephen, let me start with you. Why should we care so much in the second year of a test like this?
Well, I mean, it's a yardstick. It's part of the yardstick, right? Here's where you are. Here's where you measure up against the standards that we've agreed are going to be the standards for testing in the state. And, it's an important tool for people who plan curriculum and instruction to say, all right, well, to get to this point, we've got to do these things. But I do agree that, you can't read too much into it because it is the second year. It is a harder test than the test we were administering before. It's calibrated to an entirely different set of standards. So kids are not supposed to be doing that well on it now. It's about how they progress over time. And our problem in Michigan, of course, has been the impatience of not wanting to wait to see how well things turn out. And people say, well, this test is too hard, or it's not measuring the right thing, so let's go do something else and then start all over again. What I hope happens is that we say, look, consistency is the most important thing in testing over time. Let's stick with this, see how we can sort of move people up the ladder.
Why shouldn't we get rid of this, Ken?
We should not get rid of this. It's an incredible tool to help teachers know what to focus on.
It's interesting. You wrote something this week and you said, it's all about being honest about how we are doing and not being afraid of what the data tells us.
Well, exactly. And we knew it was not going to be good. But if you're a teacher, wouldn't you want to, or a parent, wouldn't you want to know how your kids stack up to schools across the state, as to how they stack up on other states? Because ultimately, these kids are going to have to compete with kids not only in America, but around the world. And not to want to know where we stand, I think is awful. It's kind of like if you get a bad report card and the response should be, well, we ought to make the grading standards easier. It's silly, I think.
Well, I don't think that the calls to change the M-STEP or get rid of the M-STEP are necessarily about like, oh, we're getting bad grades, let's get rid of the graders. I think not just in Michigan, but across the country, there's a lot of conversation around this model we've been using in this country for decades, where we're going to test the kids once a year and draw all kinds of conclusions from that. And in fact, the technology has advanced in such a way that you can now test children throughout the year, and a lot of schools and a lot of teachers are using tests like that are going to give teachers feedback throughout the year. So, that child is, not just getting, 30% or whatever the score is, but is deficient in the following skills and things like that. And then that teacher can then work with that child on those skills. So I think the conversation around if you did replace the M-STEP, is there another kind of test that would be able to be a teaching tool that teachers could use throughout the year?
You know what, though?
Is it the best way to measure our kids' achievement?
We've always measured achievement, whether it's a spelling test or whatever.
And
it
don't
is.
You have to?
And let's be for real. Who complains about a test? People who don't do well on it. If we were doing very well on this test, there would be
Everyone
no
would be
debate
happy.
over whether we should keep it.
Well,
or
I
not
got an
keep
A.
it.
I don't know about you people.
Exactly. And so it's the great debate about testing, to test or not to test, how much to test, what's the value of the test, who should be tested, who shouldn't be tested. And the bottom line is we have this test. It is aligned to national standards. It is a hard test. Do we want our students to be able to master a difficult test, a rigorous test, or not? That's the bottom line.
I think what people are talking about now, though, is because this test is being used as a marker for schools and a
Absolutely.
marker for schools and whether those schools are going to be shut down. Because we see now from the state school reform office saying, you know, we have the power, we haven't used it, but now we're going to be looking at this list, which is going to be coming out very soon, of the schools who are going to be in the bottom 5%. And now it's saying, well, if you haven't achieved in the last 3 years, you're going to be shut down, which starts a whole other set of conversations.
But you know what's missing
Yeah.
from that conversation? There is a part of the law that says if the school reform office shuts down your school, it can be reopened as something new and different and better. So that part of the conversation needs to be, you know, brought up. If the school reform office closes a school in Detroit, School A, it can be reopened. It'll be called School B, and you know, have a
Sure,
new
but it'll be the
teaching
same
staff. It'll
place
be the
with
same.
new teachers
So
and that.
closing is a buzzword in Detroit that really gets emotional because we've seen 160 schools like close. They're never opening again. But when the school reform office talks about close, it can be reopened.